Kenny Omega is going away for a while to heal up a series of injuries that he has been dealing with for much of the past year. That means he is out of the scheduled match with El Hijo del Vikingo at Triple Mania next month, where Omega was to have defended his AAA Mega title. He'll be having minor surgeries on his shoulder, his knee, and his abdomen. And per this week's Observer, he has been working with a torn labrum and an abdominal hernia for months now. He is hopeful to be back as early as the end of February, which kind of sounds optimistic to me. I mean, minor or not, I mean, when you're having surgery on 3 or 4 different parts of your body, it could be a while before we see him, but that's what he's hoping anyway. He had a great run as the AEW champion, but he was more than just AEW champion. With all of the injuries, he held the Impact World title for several months, and he helped give Impact its best pay-per-view buy rate in a decade, since the Hogan Bischoff days. He had great matches in AAA defending that title, and some fantastic matches in AEW as well, including the match with Hangman Page last weekend. So for anybody who wants to cast doubt on how important Kenny Omega has been to AEW, you would be an ignorant fool to believe otherwise. He deserves a ton of credit for going out there with his body falling apart and still having the quality of the matches that he was having. It's not just, well, I got to go out there and do a match, so I'll just sort of gut my way through it. He was going out there having top quality matches you would never even knew the guy was hurt. A lot of guys work hurt, but they don't all go out there and churn out great matches the way that this guy did all year. AEW now has enough names on the roster where they can afford, Kenny Omega going away for a few months. He needs to go. He needs to go heal his body, or else he's going to be headed to an early retirement. And that's not going to be good for anybody, especially when they need to finish out this story eventually with Omega going babyface again. And they already laid the groundwork for a potential feud or a power struggle within the Elite. When he gets back, they aired a backstage segment on Wednesday to open the show where he asked the Young Bucks to hold things down for him until he gets back. Adam Cole chimed in, though he thought he was talking to him. He chimed in and said, "Cleaner, don't worry, I got this." And it was an awkward moment between the two. Obviously, that foreshadows something more coming up next year. But that can't be true, because the social media samurais told me that AEW has no storylines. Every day I still get people tweeting me that. It's like, they say, what's the big deal about AEW? And I go to respond, but then I see the second part of their tweet where they say they have no stories, and I just ignore them. You can't save people like that. Some people are just they're just so dumb. Their brain, there's just some kind of malfunction that some people just cannot be helped. But Hangman Page is the AEW World Champion now. They had the big payoff to the chase that has lasted well over 2 years. And he is now the World Champion, and he's one of those young talents. I mean, he wasn't homegrown. He had a name already before he came in, but not at the level of a Kenny Omega or even a Cody or the Bucks. Yeah, he was lower down. He really did become a top star while working for AEW. So he's the first guy to hold that championship who you could really look at and say, this is an AEW homegrown guy. You couldn't say that about Chris Jericho. You couldn't say that about Jon Moxley. You couldn't say it about Kenny Omega, but you can say it about Hangman Page. Bryan Danielson beat Miro at Full Gear to earn the next shot at the AEW World title, and he showed up in heel mode on Dynamite, which I thought was fantastic. We got old school heel American Dragon, which I was not expecting. But if you think about it, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Here's what I think. I think Jon Moxley was beating Bryan Danielson at Full Gear, and he was going to get the first shot at Hangman as a heel. So if they wanted a heel against Adam Page to make sure that he is fully cheered, but not just the heel, like someone people actually think has a shot to take the championship from him, then Miro probably was not the guy. But Danielson is. And this story they're doing where Bryan is promising to run through each member of the Dark Order until he gets to Page is something that very likely would have gone to Jon Moxley had he not had to bow out of the Eliminator. He already beat the hell out of Preston Vance in the first round. And I thought that was a pretty weak opponent for Moxley at the time. Maybe that was by design, and Moxley would have been the one challenging Colt Cabana in Chicago this Wednesday instead of it being Danielson. And it would have been Jon Moxley running through all of the remaining members of the Dark Order. So what they effectively did was they gave Jon Moxley's story, there's that word again, they gave Jon Moxley's story to Bryan Danielson. And then, once the match happens and Hangman wins, Bryan can shake his hand, he puts him over like a champ, and he goes back to being the Bryan Danielson that he was before. I don't think this is a heel turn that's going to last longer than the Hangman match, because I don't think that was the original plan. Now, as far as when the match happens, it's got to be that first Dynamite on TBS or the first TNT special, which is, I believe, airing a few days later. If that is not a live show on January 8th, then it has to be January 5th. Whenever they do the Danielson-Hangman match, it cannot be on a taped show. It has to be live. So it might be the first Dynamite on TBS. They have announced another Winter is Coming special for next month. Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite on December 15th. It was Winter is Coming last December when Kenny Omega beat Moxley to become the AEW World Champion. We got a title change on live TV. Could they do the match with Danielson and Hangman on the Winter is Coming show? I think that's too soon. I think there's a better chance of seeing a big debut on that show, like a Kyle O'Reilly, or maybe the Briscoes coming over from Ring of Honor. Tony Khan tweeted that they will be revealing more information on that show about the Owen Hart Cup, including the schedule and the start date for it. A lot of people, I'm sure, on that roster are going to want in that tournament. You probably have people knocking on Tony Khan's door backstage trying to lobby for a spot in that tournament. But they're talking about the format of the tournament being unique. It might not be a traditional 8-man or 16-man bracket. Maybe it's like a G1 kind of round-robin thing. I don't know, but they're talking about the format as being something that people aren't expecting. So I'm very curious to see what they have in mind. We had an appearance by Tomohiro Ishii, the never open-weight champion from New Japan Pro Wrestling, teaming with Orange Cassidy against The Butcher and The Blade. Always love seeing Ishii. This was his first appearance in an AEW ring, and the fans reacted to him in kind. They were very happy to see him. They dug his offense when he was in there with The Butcher, and they were going back and forth. Sean Ross Sapp said The Butcher has been on tour lately with his band, but he took the night off just to wrestle Ishii, and he was going to go back on tour after. But now I see that The Butcher suffered a torn bicep during the match. So he came off that tour to wrestle Ishii, and then he got hurt. So I don't know what his status is now. You know, it's tougher to heal up from those types of injuries and muscle tears when you're older. And The Butcher is 43. And he's already coming off a thumb injury that he had earlier in the year. He missed many months for that. So I don't know when we'll see The Butcher again. I guess back to the butcher shop until he's ready to come back. Nyla Rose and Hikaru Shida had a real good match in the TBS title tournament that sent Nyla to the next round to meet the winner of the match between Ruby Soho and Chris Statlander. And on Rampage, Jade Cargill beat Red Velvet in a match that was not as good as the one from Wednesday. So as I look at this tournament bracket as it now stands, Thunder Rosa wrestles Jamie Hayter this Wednesday. That's going to be a win for Thunder Rosa. Okay, and she's going to go on to wrestle Jade Cargill, of this I am sure. And my prediction is that Jade Cargill beats Thunder Rosa when Jamie Hayter and probably Rebel and maybe even Britt Baker herself cost Rosa the match as a measure of revenge for her win over Jamie Hayter this week. That also then sets the stage for Thunder Rosa, by the way, to go after Britt Baker early next year, which is what I've been advocating for. So she goes after the Women's Championship, the World Women's Championship. So Thunder Rosa is going to be just fine. So Jade goes to the finals. And on the other side of the bracket, we have Ruby and Statlander. You know, it's a tough call because they're both very good. Both baby faces, So either one of them can advance and they would fit well in the spot. I think the winner of that match, though, is going to win the entire tournament. And I don't think Chris Statlander is winning this tournament. I think Ruby wins. I think she goes on to beat Nyla Rose in the next round, and then she stuns Jade Cargill in the finals to become the first TBS champion. One thing that was very apparent from her match on Rampage, Jade isn't ready to be the champion yet. She'll get there, but now is not the right time. I think Ruby is winning the belt. We got our first tease of CM Punk and MJF. MJF was interrupted by Punk. Punk never said a word. He just stood in the ring. MJF offered his hand. Punk laughed at him and walked away. So I'm very excited for the promo battles that await between CM Punk and MJF. I might be more interested in that than the match itself, and I think the match itself will be very good. But this is the Punk feud that I've been waiting for. I just didn't know that they were going to go to it this quickly. And it makes me wonder, if you remember when Tony Khan got photographed and he was holding that paper, he was at the Jaguars game, and it looked like he had sketched out a rough draft of the Full Gear card. The match that was listed on that sketch for CM Punk was CM Punk against Wardlow. It did not say CM Punk against Eddie Kingston, which is what we ended up getting. So I wonder, as they begin the tease for Punk and MJF, which is still, it's got to be a ways off from happening. Again, maybe that first TBS show, maybe not even until Revolution in February. But in the meantime, maybe we will get that Punk Wardlow match. Maybe that was the idea originally, that they would do it at Full Gear and it would build to Punk and MJF. I think we'll get Punk and Wardlow before we get that match. And I also think that MJF should be the first person to hand CM Punk a loss in AEW. When they do ultimately meet, I think MJF should go over in that match. Main event on Wednesday was Sammy Guevara and Jay Lethal for the TNT Championship. They had a hell of a match. It was a hell of a main event. Sammy has just looked fantastic on television recently. I even made the comment on Wednesday. Physically, it looks like he's put a little bit of muscle on, bulking up a little bit. So one day he'll move on to bigger and better things, but right now he's kind of killing it with that TNT title. Jay Lethal loses in his first match, but it was a hell of a match.